And so anyway, I have been um, commenting and then on Facebook, and then I've gotten other people have reached out to me for comments about the verdict in the case. I was kind of first shocked, to be honest with you, about the time it took, how quickly they came back with the verdict. However, the evidence was so overwhelming as a lawyer looking at that uh, I was a defense attorney many times, and we were always taught that if the verdict came too fast, it was bad news for you generally as a defendant or a defense attorney. I had cases though that went the other way that were pretty fast. So, but this was very interesting. This is a historical day for me because I teach my students in criminal justice. And that's why I'm putting this on this recording, to be ethical, professional, and educated. And I talk about that all the time. Those of you who have been in other classes of mine and been with me before know that I pride myself for that. That's one of the things I like about Rasmussen now University stands for. Very important to make sure that we understand our responsibilities to the community. And I think that one of my responsibilities to the community is to prepare individuals to be uh, good law enforcement, correction officers, probation officers, parole officers, and anything else that they become in criminal justice. So that's why this is a great day for me. So if you have a chance to, you could hit me up on Facebook as Richard Wright JD, and you'll be able to see see it on there. You may even be able to see it other than that because it's out in the public on Facebook. And Facebook Live, look under Richard Wright JD, and then you'd scroll down and you'd see the video today that I did, about almost a half an hour of it. So very interesting. Okay, take a breath and welcome to week number three. Three already of constitutional law. And my name is Richard Wright, and I will continue to be your professor for the next 3 weeks, or 2.5 weeks, I guess I should say, because the course goes so fast that before you know it, it is time to take the final exam. So you'll see that the course actually ends on, I think that's the 11th of May. But anyway, we're going to take a look at all of that now. So let me share my screen. And let's go with this. As you can see, the note taker, let me move you out of the way there. All right, so on the course homepage, and you know, I try to make sure that I do the student view first so that you can see. I started my student view. So now my screen is going to switch to what you would see as a student. And this is how you see it, as the course content, the modules, the same way that I do, course materials, and end of term survey. Those are the things that you see. I don't see it that way. And then you see announcements and archive of announcements, tools, and so forth. But let's take a look at what I've sent in terms of emails out to students. And you can see the ones that I have put out that you can see, unless you look in your individual email, and that's to all course members. The recorded lecture that I put out last week, and then also your week 2 recorded lecture. Well, that was last week, week 2. I don't know why it's showing up twice, but it is the same one. And then just so you'll know, you can see course grades, your course grades. This doesn't show whose name it is, just shows me. And it tells you for module 3, um, this is what's coming up. The Fourth Amendment project, we're going to talk about that. Relevant case law, written assignments. Then this week you have one discussion post. If you go take a look at previous weeks, week 2, you had 2 discussion, well, you have 2 discussion posts, but you have 2 discussion topics, should I say. So with week 1. So week 3 and week 6 are the ones that have only 1. So we're going to discussion of gun control. Ooh, that's a hot one. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then you have the quiz and then the live classroom, right? So we're going to take a look at that. And so, for example, if you look at the grade book to check your grades, I don't think you can see it, but I'll click on it. This is what it looks like. The assessment, the number of attempts, your grade will be in here, and then you can view the assessment. And it will tell you what I've said in comments about your points and so forth. And this was the one dealing with briefing the case. The other thing I want to show you is this, is that if you come back, got to go back to do that again. Put that back in student view, because when I leave the course, which I did just a second, you see, and I'm doing this now because I'm still trying to familiarize students with how to use this. Ordinarily, I wouldn't do this. So let me show you how this works. So then let's say for week 1 written assignment, just give you an example. You come over here and you see the attempts, and you view the assessment, because what you've done is you've added your information to it. So assessment due date, the number of attempts, grading points, and then it tells you over here, submit the assignment. So you would do it according to the Dropbox as you normally would, but it says past due. You know why? Because this is if I was a student grading, that would be late. Okay. So just showing you again how you can submit and see your grades as well. Okay. Let's go back into the course now so I can get back to the regular view. Okay. So now let's take a look at, I want to see the course calendar. Take a look at the course calendar. I like the month view. As you can see, scrolling on down, see the circle? That's where we are. That's today. And it tells you the initial post. And then this one says 2, but in reality, should be only 1. Let me see if I can taking this one out. Edit a single event and throw that in the trash. Okay, the reason why is because almost every week, there we go. So for today, there is 1 initial post, and the other dot is because of this. If you scroll down, there it is. It's the live lecture. So you notice that the last date that you had, well, these were the assignments from week 2. where you had your three dots. Excuse me. So you'll notice where you have your dots again, refreshing the memory of some people. And then Saturday, the 24th, you have one dot. Guess what that is? That is your reply post, discussion on gun control, which is the post that's due for this week as well. Okay. Now let's look at back to the month view. And you can see, as soon as I can move my mug out of the way, going over to May. Why I'm at May? Because the course ends May 11th. So you can see how close we are. We're the 20th. Next week is the 27th. The following week is the 4th. And then that's it. That's how close we are to the end. And that the last day of class is when all assignments are due. And that's so if you go to the 11th of May, you'll see your initial post due for both of them. And you scroll down, it's going to say the discussion post. That's because these are your reply posts. Okay. And then your final exam, and then your live classroom lecture. Moving that again. Then your written assignment. That will be due on the 11th of May. All right. So it's very important for you to understand and take a look at your calendar. Keep up to date with that. So let's go back to the month view. And let's go back to April. And again, it takes you right back where we are. So that's how important the calendar is, because it gives due date and times. All right. Let's see what else I want to do here before I go into the next bit of material. Notice I have to keep leaving the course. That's something that they have to work on, trying to get going so that we don't have to keep doing that, going back to content. So here's the calendar. Here's where you go and see discussions, but I don't look. Oh, thank you for saying that. You mean, okay, yes, that's true. Thank you for reminding me of that. Let me go back to the calendar. That's a good point, and I'll show you why. That is absolutely correct. It's not an error. Thank you. So that those who look at the video will say, hey, what happened here? Let's go back to May. All right, so let's go. That you'll notice that on the 4th, which we normally have, but we will have a lecture on the 7th as well. This is week 5. This is week 6, because otherwise you'd have a lecture on the 11th. That's why that's like that. That is so important. So week 5, and actually it's in the announcements, but that is so important for you to realize that. Thank you. That's a good catch. It wasn't an accident. It is designed that way, because it wouldn't make sense for me to give you a lecture on the 11th when you have, that's the last day of class. So a very important final lecture will take place on the 7th at 8:30 p.m., a rare Friday night lecture. So very, 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 very important. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention, so I can clarify that to the students. All right. That's why it's always good to have somebody else in here other than me while I'm talking, because so I don't confuse anybody. All right. So now let's go back into the class again. And now I want to take a look at the announcement. Let's go to that. The announcement for week 3. Here it is. In week 3, module 3, protecting basic freedoms, we'll talk about today. read chapter 5 and 6 of constitutional law and complete the activity First Amendment and gun control, which we'll go over. I sent previously the PowerPoints for chapters 5 and 6 to everyone, so you should have them. Then it reminds you of our lecture that's taking place right now. And then it talks about the fact that participating in the discussion post gun control, and you know the deadline again tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time for the initial post, and Saturday 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time for the reply post. And then finally complete the written assignment, freedom of press and the right to a fair trial. That's going to be something that fits with what has been going on. And then we're going to talk about the Fourth Amendment project, the next segment of it, relevant case law. And I'll talk about that. And then you'll have a midterm exam, which the best way to prepare for that is to go over the PowerPoints from weeks 1 and weeks 2 and week 3 before you take the test. Do your reading before that, and also finally I recommend that you complete your assignments. Very important that you do that. I hope students will listen to the lecture before they attempt to do the midterm exam, because that's the best way to prepare. Students who actually have followed and looked at the PowerPoints as a study tool and have read the chapters along with each week as they're supposed to, and completed their assignments, will maximize in terms of the midterm exam. And again, it is timed, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then complete the mid-quarter student survey. So as far as grading assignments, you already know this, but I'll remind you that your assignments are due the Friday after you submit them. So in other words, all written assignments are due on Sundays. So last Sunday, which was the 18th, the assignments from week 2, and I will be grading them, and they will be completely graded by Friday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, or earlier because there's not as many in this class. And you'll have those grades. Don't wait until then to study. Start studying based on what I said earlier. Of course, if you need to reach out to me, you already know you can reach out to me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. Very, very, very important. And so I encourage you to be strong and finish strong. Stay strong, and as you go through this course, you can't fall really behind too much, because if you do, it will create a problem for you. I don't want students to cram for this course. I don't think you learn that way, and you're doing yourself a disservice, because the goal of my teaching is not to cram material in your head, but to get you to apply critical thinking to understand the theories of the topics that we discuss, and to ask questions if you need as to how they actually apply. But I kind of, from using my own experience, as I constantly do in my classes, share with my students those details. And so the requirements are found in the module, and then in the rubric, which I previously sent each of you, but I go over them anyway. So that's our announcement for this week. Okay. Let's go into let me move that up there. If you notice, when you open up, it tells you in the clock when our lectures take place and all of that as well. So now let's come down and let's look at by the way, a student once asked, how did they reach me? I gave my phone number, But if you go to course tools, and then you go to syllabus, which you have access to yourself, you will see my comment about 25th hour today and my phone number, and a reminder that you have to do research for all written assignments as well. So that's how you can find it, because a student said to me they didn't know how to find my phone number, but it's in week 1 module, and it's also every week if you go in and use these tools as well. So let's take a look at, let's get into the module itself. So the overview and activities of the module consists of several things. We're going to teach you how to identify freedoms set forth in the First Amendment, the right to free speech, and the impact on the criminal justice system. We're going to discuss regulation of guns. God knows we have issues right now taking place in our country with guns. And we're going to examine the gun control debate. So your readings, once again, chapters 5 and 6 of the text. And again, the content, First Amendment and the control, gun control. And then here are the actual assignments: the project, the discussion, the live classroom lecture, the written assignment, and then also the midterm, which is not a grade, but the midterm survey. Okay. All right. This says you will need to contact and schedule an interview in time to submit your assignments in Module 4. Your interview must be completed. Remember what I said, though. You don't really have to do an interview if you can't. We talked about that previously, and I'll talk about that again in a few minutes. All right. So let's talk about the course project. As I shared with you earlier, you've picked your topic in week 2. And so now you're going to do research on that area that you selected. You're going to pick case law, relevant case law. And this tells you where to find the information that you're going to use. You need to brief the cases. Brief the cases, which I previously sent information, and we talked about briefing cases last week as well during the lecture, how to brief a case. And so for this assignment, submit the case briefs, including the proper citations that you've chosen to use for your final project. Now, I told you all the details of case briefs. I'm not going to repeat that. That's in week 2's lecture. And also, I sent you a special email with that in. So what you're going to do is you're going to, for this assignment, write a synopsis about a paragraph long on at least 3 of your secondary sources. Secondary sources. Gives examples here. Secondary sources are news articles, academic journals, or law reviews that discuss your amendment or case. All right, make sure you properly cite them in your paper. Your paper should be proofread for grammar and punctuation. All right, submit your completed assignment to the Dropbox the way that you do in Word document. People, do not submit it to me in PDF or as a PowerPoint or as a photo. Excuse me a minute. Do not do that, because you will get a 0, and you don't want that. So make sure you do it as a Word document. And I went over last week how to make sure that you do that as well. So that's the assignment for the Fourth Amendment. That's what you have to do. Make sure that you get that done. Now, if you go back, just to remind you, I want to take you back a minute. Take you back. I think it was in week 2. Yeah, the course project. Remember, I introduced it to you. And I said that in week number 3, relevant case law and secondary source. Number 4, current topics. Current topics. Number 5, then you do the interview, or as we will get there, we'll be talking about what you have to do. And I think I kind of shared that there's an alternate assignment that you'll be able to do. So don't worry about that. So the main thing for you to worry about this week is this case law and secondary sources, along with like making sure that you brief the cases. Okay. So again, if you choose to do the interview, you choose to do the interview. But it is problematic for some students. That's why we have the alternate assignment. That will not come into play until later. All right, so let's go back to, let's close this down. Go back to week 3. Okay, so the Fourth Amendment relevant case law, you got that. Now, the written assignment that goes with that, freedom of the press and the right to a fair trial. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So in this assignment, you should be aware that every person has a right to a fair trial under the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, and the trial must be public, except juvenile cases are not. That's the exception. And the freedom of press is there. So the press has to be able to report on it. So in a 1 to 2 page paper, answer the following using the First Amendment to support your answer. Do you believe that the press can have an effect on a potential jury pool, thereby denying defendant the right to a fair trial? If so, why? If not, why? Elaborate and explain it. A 1 to 2 page double space supported with citations in the body and references at the end. This is APA with a cover page. That's all I'm going to say about it, because I know you know what that is. And then submit it as a Word document as well. The maximum points are 80, and you know that it is due the 25th, which is this Sunday. Okay, very important. Very, very, very important. If you have any questions about it, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Try not to reach out to me Sunday. Not that it's so much that I have things I do Sunday. I talk to students, but you want to reach out before that. So that's the assignment there. And then the discussion on gun control. That's your initial post that is due tonight. And then, so what would your answer be to the gun control debate? What do you suggest our legislatures that would solve this problem? How should they solve it? Take into account both sides of the debate in your answer. Your initial post, again, is due on tonight, and your reply post is due on Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Very important. A few of you have submitted them already. I'm not going to go on and show you. Remember, this is a post first. If you don't submit a discussion post first, you will not see it until you do. And then your quiz. 15, the multiple choice questions. So the time limit is 15 minutes, so that means you roughly have a minute per question. That means you really got to know and read carefully. Make sure that you pick the right one. But it has multiple choice and true false questions. Again, you don't have notes. You're abiding by the academic misconduct policy as you complete this. Very, very, very important. And then your live classroom lecture is due here. What you're going to find here is, it says here, this is where you actually will have found getting to where we are now. But after this is over, I changed this into the actual recorded link and post that there. That's how you'll find that. And then of course that is due by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And the way you do that for 10 points is submit your answer and download it. So make sure you do that, and it will show up, and then I will grade it. Each day that you're late, of course, you know you lose not 10% of the grade, but you lose one. Well, it really is 1 point. So anyway, so those are the assignments for the week. All right. And that's what I wanted to tell you. Okay, so now let's talk about these topics. Here are the topics. Move that over there. So we're going to talk about, first of all, the First Amendment and gun control. All right. So let's talk about the First Amendment that is listed up here at the top. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise, abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Okay, or the people to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. And this particular constitutional right gives the individual's right to worship the way that they desire, and to allow the freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is not an absolute. If it's fighting words, then it's not going to apply. Or the press. So you can't muzzle the press. Now, what you can do during the course of a trial, because of the Sixth Amendment right, is the judges can keep the press from speaking and issue what we call a gag order. And that's not muzzling the press, but what it is making sure that there are certain things that the parties themselves don't talk to the press about. The press can report on what they want to report on, what they see in the courtroom, and provide that information. Many of our cases, i.e. the Chauvin case, the O.J. Simpson case, all the big cases that you know, Trayvon Martin, all these cases are now on television. Cameras are allowed in the courtroom. It's different from when I was practicing. We didn't have those things, but so therefore the public is able to see. Excuse me. So now the press has a right to report upon what is going on regarding the cases, and they share that on usually on a daily basis, which brings us to the point of individuals who are selected as jurors. They are usually requested by the judges, as in this case, the Chauvin case, not to look at the news, even though they were not sequestered. And usually what the judge does is the judge will sequester the jury, excuse me, and is lock them up, as they did with this case, from the time that they actually began to deliberate until they reached the final verdict. And so keeps them from listening to what is said by the news media or anybody else during that particular time. But again, generally what the judge will do even before sequestration is tell the jury not to. And so the jury is on honor, just like you are when you take those quizzes and tests. We're not there with you, but you know, if we find out that you did use some material, you can be penalized and disciplined up to being dismissed from the school. Well, if the judge finds out that you violated his order verbally, it doesn't have to be in writing, then you can also suffer some consequences as well. Then it talks about the peacefully assemble. That's how people are allowed to assemble and to peacefully protest. Peacefully protest. Now, let me say something about that. Unfortunately, when peaceably assembled individuals come together, there are what we call antagonists who have their own agendas. And what they will do is they will attempt to do whatever they can to disrupt the idea of what the parties are protesting about. And then um, um, the media has to be very careful not to go for that bait. Sure, they report it, but it must be quite clear that people not deny people peacefully to assemble because of people that use that to riot and loot. Those are not people who are protecting or operating under the First Amendment. Those are criminals. Those are individuals who are committing crimes. So be aware that I have learned how to make sure that people understand that that all just because you don't agree with what they protest, what they're protesting. Like for example, I don't agree with if the Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan want to peacefully protest and assemble. I don't agree with their message, but I don't agree with stopping them from doing that. Because if we stop them, then we can stop others. And so we allow that. However, when it gets to be violent or putting situations that could be violent, then in that case, then it goes beyond the First Amendment protection. And we're not going to go into that because this is not a course that we talk about that in detail. We try to keep the constitutional issues within the context of criminal law. So at first read, the First Amendment doesn't seem to have much to do with criminal justice. As it says, it seems to be more about the freedoms. However, when you inspect it closer, there are First Amendment issues. For example, the First Amendment does protect free speech. It does not protect all free speech. Obscenity is not allowed. Okay, so that's Miller versus California, and then we talk about obscenity. So that is actually a criminal action when you present obscene materials as well. So you can violate the Constitution and at the same time it's not protected unless it passes what we call the Miller test. And I'm not going to get into the details of the Miller test. But as a general rule, criminal justice has to do with all of this because, as it says, pornography is a form of personal expression. So they determine under this above whether or not there is any kind of taken as a whole, if the article, if the item taken as a whole, if you look at C in the test, taken as a whole, lacks literary, artistic, or political value. But if it does have any literal, artistic, political, scientific value, then it is ultimately going to be protected. And that's how it works, except when we deal with children. Children are given additional protections under the obscenity test of the Miller case. Okay, very important. All right. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about is that, and it doesn't really cover this in the materials here, but I will cover it now, is that the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution clashes sometimes with the First Amendment of the freedom of the press, because the media has the right to report to the public about what is going on. And the question comes out, and this is in one of our assignments, is there a violation of the First Amendment, Sixth Amendment right of a defendant to a fair trial because there's a lot of pre-trial publicity when it comes to selecting jurors? Well, that is why we have this portion of selection, which there was an extensive amount of what we call voir dire, which means to seek the truth. That's a Latin phrase. And where the jurors are questioned about their propensity to reach a conclusion without considering all of the evidence. And so the question comes out, for example, in this George Floyd case, where actually it was the Derek Chauvin case, but George Floyd was the victim. Was Chauvin denied his First Amendment right to a Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial because the video was played over and over? Well, the answer is no, for two reasons. Number one, that was testimony and evidence that was presented, and guess what else? The defense cannot come back and say it denied the individual the right to a fair trial because they used it too. So both sides used the video. So some people might say, well, that kind of had an open and shut to the case. Well, yes and no. Uh, Judging from the amount of time that it took for them to come back with a verdict after 10 hours, some might say yes, but no court will overturn that because the defense utilized it. Now, the defense could have objected to the use of the video, but would have lost on every hand, because that video was an exhibit that the parties had a chance to agree to or stipulate to, and they did. So for those of you good people who say, well, those people then now who were selected by the jury, everybody saw that. Well, there were some jurors who said they didn't see the full thing. And actually, to be honest with you, there were videos, if you followed the trial, that were released during the trial, such as the body cams and other cameras, were not released before the case started. So the point of the matter is that you got to be aware of this, is that there are cameras everywhere. People have video cameras, like these. And Exhibit A was that video that was done by that young person who was with their 9-year-old niece or cousin, and it's decided to put that video in, and that kind of like actually made it possible for the indictment and charge. So my point being is this: you can't utilize that as a basis for it, because if you recall, there was evidence introduced scientifically on both sides that said that maybe it was drugs and maybe it wasn't drugs, which I never thought it was. But the point of the matter is that the jury decided that based on, and they haven't said what made them decide it, but I think as the defense heard the prosecution say in their rebuttal, Mr. Blackwell, the attorney who spoke last, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, use your common sense." There it is, right there. So there is no clash between the Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial and the jury that was selected. The attorneys had their opportunities to challenge the jurors, and they had a jury that listened to the case. And that's what I wanted to talk about, the First Amendment. And they don't have material in here, but I'm explaining to you that the media's pre-trial information reported that the public has the right to know what's happening in their communities, and eventually end up on another in the case as a juror. There were arguments to move the case to another jurisdiction. That wouldn't have changed it, and especially with the fact that social media and that these videos and what incident that we have now these days generally goes across the county lines and state lines and goes on the World Wide Web. So the point of the matter is that um, sometimes though that evidence can help the defense. In this case, it did not. So that's all I wanted to say about the First Amendment and the Sixth Amendment in terms of dealing with it. And I've already shared a little bit about the obscenity. I think they spent a little too much time talking about the obscenity in the First Amendment and should have added material. And I'm going to talk to them about adding Sixth Amendment material along with the First Amendment materials. But that's why I covered it that way. So now let's spend the rest of the time, we got about 8 more minutes left, dealing with regulation of guns. So the Second Amendment, everybody reads this way. Well, not everybody. A lot of people read in well-regulated militia, being necessary to security of a free state. Now, they read the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But they do not read the context of the whole statement. I have taught this many times, and I have argued that the Second Amendment was intended to deal with the well-regulated militia. Who is the well-regulated militia? Supposedly the police, the National Guard, and other military individuals. Then it says the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay. Handguns, number one, were not anticipated when this was written. They were not. Rifles are what was involved in, muskets and things like that. There were no handguns. There were generally those kinds of weapons. Now, there definitely, I repeat, there definitely were not semi-automatic or automatic weapons. Unfortunately, as you and I both know, we have too many instances that we've had, even this year, of killings that took place where either semi-automatic or automatic weapons were used. The police don't have them. They can't have them. They would end up with suits. But these individuals can go to gun shows and get them. The other issue is trying to regulate who can and who cannot get a weapon. There is a big hole, huge hole in the law that allows individuals to miss the check on their mental state. There are too many people obtaining weapons. And this is not my opinion, this is fact. And you follow and find out that they were suspected of being a person who might do one of those things. Almost all of them, you will find out that a family member will oftentimes be aware, or there have been some previous incidents where a lot of them have been put under the radar of law enforcement, but they didn't stay on it. And then as soon as they remove they're paying attention to it, one of these types of incidents happen. And unfortunately, with the hatred that has gone on in this country for the last 5 years or so, at least, and the increase, as the FBI has said, of hate crimes going on based on race, sex, national origin, and all, even religious police, where you can't even go into church or synagogue anymore, is that it reached the stage where people are being killed because individuals are able to get guns and utilize these guns. And again, I repeat, they don't have regular guns. They have high-powered weapons. They have semi-automatic, like the guy in um, Vegas, the Vegas shooting. That was, it was clear what he had. It was clear what the guy had that did the shooting most recently uh, down in out in Colorado. And then there was just another shooting last night. And then it just goes on and on and on. And so we have these problems that have taken place. In previous times, we've had, as it points out here, Representative Arizona, U.S. Representative Gabrielle Giffords. Um, she was shot in the head. This was a representative. Her husband, I can't think of his name. His last name is Nelson, because Nelson is her married name. That is now in the Senate. I think he's in the Senate, or either or a representative. But anyway, he's in the national federal government, and he ran for office and was elected out in Arizona. And then the shooting of Trayvon Martin, and it just goes on and on and on. So the question is, how important is the right to bear arms when this right puts guns in the hands of the wrong people? That's the question that I'm asking. We need to understand that people have a constitutional right to bear arms, but we also need proper gun control. We need to make sure that as we try to control drugs, and we've legalized marijuana in many states, it's still controlled. So if you try to control guns as much as marijuana is controlled, advocates of the NRA and organizations like that will argue, oh, Second Amendment violation of our constitutional rights. No, that's not even true. You know, constitutional rights are really argued really way too much. Like, for example, telling people that wearing a mask violates the constitutional rights of people don't want to. We're talking about health and safety, but that's a little digression. But the truth of the matter is that we need a balance between this. Those of you who know about what happened with John Hinckley years ago shot President Reagan, and he ended up I think it was the press secretary Brady, who was made a quadriplegic because of the gunshots. A police chief who was a Secret Service man, McCarthy, took a bullet in that instance. So the fact of the matter is that we need meaningful gun legislation to protect the public from those who don't. And unfortunately, we have a problem with Congress passing laws because the NRA seems to have a lot of the legislators in their pocket and get a lot of funding from it. It's kind of hard to vote for something against something that has provided a lot of money. That's a conflict of interest. Somehow or another, that kind of thing needs to be fixed. But every state, in addition to that, and we're just about wrapping up, has gun laws. For example, in our state, where I am in Illinois, we have a FOID card. You have to have a fire owner's identification card, and you go through and they do background checks. And now we have what we call carry and conceal weapons, which allow you to carry weapons that must be concealed. Illinois was one of the last states to have a law like that. Some states have open carry, like Texas has that. States like Florida, for example, don't require a FOID card, except where the person has a concealed weapon. And so each state has a different law. So the point of the matter is there is a clash there about the Second Amendment and the constitutional rights that are involved. Okay. And that covers everything that I have for today. And so as I end this session, I am going to provide you with a key phrase. And that key phrase that I want to give you is something I most recently talked about, and it's very simple. Gun control. Give me that, gun control, and you'll get your points for the lecture. That's about it for me. I'm going to be signing off. Again, I'll see you next Tuesday at the same time for week number 4 of constitutional law. Again, study hard. I told you how to prepare for that. And I'm going to sign off right now. So good night. Stay safe. And see you again next week. Thank you. Good night.